Chapter 526, Using Violence to Enforce Submission. Chapter 526, Using Violence to Enforce Submission. Ji Yang, I am really curious. What could be buried underneath that mineshaft that could make a flower blossom tear cultivator like yourself not hesitate to become a favored minister, willing to put forward plans and ideas for a spiritual pedestal tear cultivator? Ling Han said. Hiss. Immediately, everyone was astonished. Ji Yang was in the flower blossom tier? That couldn't be. That definitely was impossible. These words came out of the mouth of a young man in his late teens, so how could they possibly convince others? Meanwhile, Ji Yang smiled, and said, It is also my first time to see such a young person who is already in the flower blossom tier like yourself. I won't say that there will not be no other in future, but at least there has never been one before in history. Putong, this time, a great number of people stumbled and fell onto the ground. Ling Han was in the flower blossom tier too? Were these two guys simply flattering each other endlessly? How old could this youngster be? At most 20 years old, right? In the desolate north, someone at this age had to be in the gushing spring tier at most. Moreover, how absolutely difficult was it to take the step into the flower blossom tier? Even if given 20 years' time, one might not even succeed, what more when this brat only looked to have lived that many years. However, Bo Wenlin could feel a cold sensation rising deep within his. He remembered that his whole body became weak from a mere glare by Ling Han. That kind of power was absolutely strong to a terrifying extent. What if Ling Han really was in the flower blossom tier? His son's vengeance, forget it, this might bring ruin to the entire Bo clan. Ling Han laughed and said, Master Na is merely amazed due to lack of experience. There may not be one as young as I in the flower blossom tier in this era, but that might not have been the case in the past. It is only that there has been a lapse in our history, and we lack a complete knowledge of matters that happened millennia ago. You are right. Ji Yang nodded, then changed the subject as he said, However, for such a young the flower blossom tear cultivator like yourself, I think that there is definitely no other who can compare to you in this world. Nyo, he's looking down on you, Ling Han said to Nyo, smiling. Beat him up. With a flash, Nyo's figure vanished from everyone's sight, and with a xiao, appeared right in front of Ji Yang, her little fists shooting towards him. She had never used any kind of martial arts technique. She would only use her fists to punch, her claws to tear, and her teeth to bite, and these three simple moves were enough for her. Ji Yang released a sudden grunt. He had not foreseen that Nyo could move so quickly. No. He had not imagined at all that such a little girl was actually a cultivator, and furthermore, he could sense from this one move that the power behind her blow, no matter what, had to be at least at the level of the flower blossom tier. If he really was struck by such a punch, he might not die, but his D*** would probably burst. What else could happen? Nyo was really too short, so if her punch landed, where do you think her fist would hit? Though Ji Yang looked beautiful, he was definitely not a female. How could he actually dare to allow Nyo to punch that kind of place? He quickly waved a hand, and a wall of ice froze up in front of him. There were multiple unadorned, ancient characters flickering on the ice. This kind of pattern was really rarely seen. Ling Han was extremely curious. The patterns were a display of one's martial intent, and though most people had endless differences in their respective patterns, the principle was still the same. One could still trace another's pattern to its source. For example, in this plane, all cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques had been developed from over 100 different ancient arts. The corresponding similarities they shared could still be found. But Ji Yang's patterns were extremely unfamiliar. They definitely originated from an ancient art that was absolutely different from the norm. How strange. This man had strange origins, and his aims were also quite strange. Peng, Nyo's fist landed solidly on the ice. Ka. Immediately, cracks appeared on the ice, then it shattered. However, it managed to help Ji Yang gain enough time to remove himself from danger, yet Nyo continued an endless barrage of attacks, pursuing Ji Yang, so he could only retreat continuously away from her blows. One by one, walls of ice appeared, and subsequently were shattered. One kept stepping back relentlessly, whereas the other pursued even faster. Eventually, it became a one-sided thrashing on Hunyo's part as she did not give her prey the slightest bit of opportunity to fight back. Naji Yang was finally enraged, and with a cold humph, the strange scene of a tide rising in the ocean actually appeared behind him. He opened his mouth suddenly, and Pu spat out an arrow of water. Upon a closer look, there were similar ancient characters spread all over this arrow of water. This was no ordinary arrow of water, but one filled with destructive power, capable of becoming a threat to a flower blossom tear cultivator. Hunyo finally halted, then with an abrupt turn, narrowly dodged this attack. At the same time, this also gave Naji Yang enough time to finally get his bearings, and for the first time in this exchange, obtain an edge over her. Naji Yang's face was filled with absolute shock. He exclaimed, "How could this be? So young, and yet already in the flower blossom tier?" A flower blossom tear cultivator that had yet to reach his 20s was already enough of a shock that his eyeballs almost popped out of his head. What more Hunyo, who only looked to be about 5 or 6 years old? Even if she started cultivation when she was still in the womb, how could her cultivation reach this level? The others were practically about to pass out from shock. With this exchange of blows, the aura of the flower blossom tear was fully exposed, making fear and reverence rise up in all of their hearts. This was because flower blossom tear cultivators had completely discarded their mortality and ascended from the mortal world. Aside from those at the level of rulers in martial arts, this kind of aura would absolutely suppress everyone else. This time, they had no choice but to believe the facts in front of them. Whether it was Naji Yang or Linghan, or even a 5 or 6-year-old little girl, they were all in the flower blossom tier. This was unnatural, absolutely unnatural. When had flower blossom tear become so cheap? All of a sudden, there were 3 such mighty cultivators, and moreover, 2 of them were still so young. Linghan grinned and said, "Frog that sits at the bottom of a well, do you now know there will always be someone else better no matter how perfect things appear to be?" Hunyo bared her teeth at Naji Yang. She had yet to use her strongest weapon. Naji Yang still looked very astonished and asked, "Are you the excellent disciples of Heaven's Sword Sect or Cloud Phoenix Sect?" "Neither." Linghan shook his head. "You don't have to guess our origins. I came only to say one thing: immediately stop the excavation of the ancient mineshaft. I regret that I cannot comply with your wishes." Naji Yang shook his head as well. "Young man, no matter which party you come from, you must definitely not interfere in this matter. This is a word of advice from me. If not, your only path is death." "Oh, is it really so exciting?" Linghan laughed loudly. "Then I want to play even more." Naji Yang's face was filled with displeasure, and he asked, "What do you think of my skill?" "Not that great. I will be able to subdue you in 3 moves." Linghan tossed out casually. Naji Yang almost died from fury. Forcibly suppressing his anger, he said, "Where I come from, even if there aren't 100,000, there are at least 80,000 people at my level. And there is at least 10 or 20,000 people stronger than me." Hiss. The faces of those from Fire Country all twitched uncontrollably. What kind of terrifying party was that flower blossom tear cultivators numbered 10,000? One had to understand, in the whole Fire Country, only the old emperor from 4 generations ago managed to break through to the flower blossom tier with the aid of power of the nation. Furthermore, the power of the nation of one country was only sufficient to produce 1 flower blossom tear cultivator. Moreover, there were even people stronger than flower blossom tear, and there was even as many as 10 or 20,000 of these terrifyingly powerful people. Too terrifying. What kind of party was that? Linghan gave an indifferent "oh," and said, "Then I'm really curious now, which party did you come from?" That is none of your business. You need only know that if you stand against me, you will suffer a tragic end." Naji Yang said coldly. "Nyo, tell me, are we people who have managed to grow so far by being scared?" Linghan suddenly asked Hunyo. "No." Hunyo exclaimed clearly. "Then if someone threatens us, what should we do?" Linghan asked. "Beat him till he surrenders, use violence to beat him into submission," Hunyo declared with extreme ferocity. Chapter 527, Sea Race. Chapter 527, Sea Race. Ling Han looked at Nag Yang and said with a smile, "Our motto is to use violence to enforce submission. If you don't submit, we'll beat you into submission." Nag Yang's expression turned even colder, and he said, "Young man, don't be rash. If you do, you will fuck." He had not even finished his words when Ling Han already charged over. Ling Han leaped into the air and immediately aimed a kick at his face. As the saying went, in a fight, never aim for the face. And Ling Han not only wanted to hit Nag Yang's face, he actually wanted to use his foot. Ling Han was really looking down on him too much. "Junior, you are too arrogant," Nag Yang exclaimed in anger. He raised his hand and used a palm strike to parry the kick. Hong, 7 spikes of ice spread out. The icy air was powerful, and instantly, the surrounding temperature dropped a few dozen degrees. Shards of ice formed in the air endlessly before falling onto the ground. There were simple patterns flickering on the icy spikes. They formed multiple characters, as if they had transformed these 7 spikes of ice into divine weapons. Nag Yang smirked coldly. "Unless you are an expert in kicking techniques, if you use your weak area to attack what your opponent is strong in, then you're going to be in for a great deal of suffering." Peng. This kick landed solidly. The spikes of ice instantly shattered, becoming shards that danced in the air. Furthermore, it was as if Ling Han's foot had not been hindered at all, and continued its course ruthlessly towards Nag Yang's face. How could this be? Though Nag Yang did not exclaim in shock, his face still held that astonished expression. He was too flabbergasted. How big of a power gap was there between the two of them that would result in such a one-sided situation? Peng. Before Nag Yang knew it, Ling Han's foot landed mercilessly directly onto his face. Due to the powerful impact, Nag Yang instantly collapsed onto the ground. His whole head was forcibly trampled into the limestone path, making him look like a headless monster. Hiss, that was too horrible. A grand and mighty flower blossom tear cultivator was actually thrashed so horribly. Peng, pieces of rock flew and Nag Yang shot back up, his expression completely dark. In such a small, mundane place like the North region, he actually suffered such humiliation. This was practically enough to fill him with the urge to commit suicide. Thankfully, it was not witnessed by any members of his party, or he would really have no pride left to face them. Ju. Peng. He just said one word, and immediately was knocked over by another kick from Ling Han. His head was once again buried in the limestone path. A hint of sympathy flashed over the faces of all the bystanders. In their eyes, flower blossom tear cultivators were a revered existence as if they were gods, but a being like that was currently suffering so terribly now, having his head being repeatedly stepped on by another. Really, they didn't know what to say anymore. Fuck. Nag Yang shot out of the ground for the second time, but like before, he merely said one word when he was once again stomped back into the ground by Ling Han's foot. 3 times. 5 times, 10 times. By the 10th time, Nag Yang finally understood that he was completely no match for Ling Han. Thus, he decided to be more obedient. He not only didn't shoot back out of the ground, he did not make any more sound. He was acting like a complete ostrich, but what could you do about it? Ari, for a flower blossom tier elite to do this kind of thing, what a humiliation. But all knew that the reason for that was because Ling Han was too powerful, and was completely superior to him in battle prowess. What else could Nag Yang do but submit? Fun. Hunyo clapped her hands, then swept a threatening glare over the spectators, and asked in displeasure, "Why does Nyo not hear applause?" Pa, 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 pa. Everyone hurriedly began applauding. They could not afford to offend this little girl, either. Ling Han smiled slightly, crouched on the ground, and asked, "Master Na, can we converse calmly now?" Nag Yang wanted to cry but had no tears. He had been trying to resolve things peacefully, but the other party was so damn violent. At first, Ling Han had a little girl attack him, then he himself attacked. How many times had he been thrashed by now? But in front of these two violent characters, how could he dare voice any objection? He quickly clapped a hand on the ground, expressing that he was willing to have a peace talk. Then talk nicely. Don't bury your head deep into the ground, or I will think that you have some complaint about me. Oh, right. You don't have a complaint about me, do you? Nag Yang pulled his head out of the ground, shook his head quickly and exclaimed, I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare. Wouldn't dare or wouldn't? Ling Han asked, smiling. Wouldn't, and wouldn't dare to, either. Nag Yang finally became smarter this time round. Ling Han patted his shoulder, then said, "This is a very good start. I am very satisfied. You had better continue to let me feel satisfied. Otherwise, if I am dissatisfied, then you'll suffer." "Understand, I understand." Nag Yang quickly nodded. "Talk about your origins first." Ling Han was very curious. Nag Yang's martial arts inheritance seemed to be greatly different from the traditional Dao of this world. Nag Yang hesitated. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Actually, I can also search your soul." Nag Yang's face instantly turned green. If his soul was searched, then his spirit would be completely destroyed, and he would be deader than dead. However, soul search was definitely not something that a flower blossom tear cultivator should be able to use, but the problem was, what other flower blossom tear cultivator could be as young as Ling Han? Thus, he would rather believe Ling Han's threat than doubt him only to regret later. "I come from the sea race," he quickly answered. Sea race. Ling Han was surprised. In both his lifetimes, he had never heard of this sea race. Where had this party come from? Wait, outside the desolate north was the ocean, so was the sea race a race that resided in the oceans? Nag Yang nodded, and without waiting for Ling Han to ask, began to explain, "Actually, the majority of this world is sea. I come from the Northern Sea. Aside from that, there also exist 4 other seas: the Eastern Sea, the Western Sea, the Southern Sea, and the Central Sea." No wonder Nag Yang had said that where he came from, there were 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators, and there were at least 10 to 20,000 people stronger than even the flower blossom tear. "Yi, the 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators you mentioned, were you referring all the seas, or just your Northern Sea?" Ling Han questioned. "Our Northern Sea," Nag Yang answered honestly. Ling Han's expression changed slightly. Though he had never gone to the Central Prefecture or the other 3 regions, he roughly estimated that there were only about 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators in them altogether. The North region had the least, possibly not even having 10,000. But merely the Northern Sea already had 100,000 flower blossom tear cultivators. If all 5 seas had about the same power base, then how powerful was the sea race? "Among your sea race, which sea is the most powerful?" he asked. "Naturally, the Central Sea. That is where our Sea Emperor resides, the place that all members of the sea race hope to reach," Nag Yang declared, filled with longing. "Give me some concrete details about the martial arts level in your Northern Sea," Ling Han asked. Since Nag Yang had already spoken, he no longer had any intention to keep matters hidden. He said, "In our Northern Sea, the leader is naturally the royal clan of the sea race, and beneath them, there are a great many general clans." When he saw Ling Han shoot him a glare, he hurriedly added, "General clans have at least powerful elites of the deity transformation tier, whereas the royal clan has at least heaven tier ultimate elites. It is rumored that there were even a few kings that had broken through to the shattering void tier, and they are the most powerful existence in the whole world." The shattering void tier. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful. How important was it to be born in a good era? In his last life, there was a great shortage of spiritual qi in the whole world, and the environment for martial arts was terrible. Even monsters like the Sword Emperor could only be trapped in the heaven tier. And with his talent in alchemy, if he had been born in an era like the current one, he definitely could have broken through to the shattering void tier, or even become a true immortal, simply with alchemy. The current him was absolutely not qualified to stand against an ultimate elite of the shattering void tier. Chapter 528, A Vial. Chapter 528, A Vial. When he touched on the subject of the shattering void tier, Nag Yang seemed to have regained his confidence. He said, "Human races, sir, even if your battle prowess is monstrous, you are still only in the flower blossom tier after all. There is no way that you would be able to match the sea race of our Northern Sea. Furthermore, I am under the command of a lord from one of the general clans to come here to retrieve an ancient object. I shall leave upon retrieving it. Us members of the sea race dislike land, and will definitely not invade the land masses. These words were quite believable. At least, Ling Han had never heard of the sea race in his last life. Obviously, they each minded their own business, and did not make any attempts to trespass onto each other's territory. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Has your brain been kicked by a donkey? In the territory of our human race, you still ask me not to meddle in the business of others?" Ji Yang instantly felt cold. It was one thing how powerful the sea race was, the problem now was that he had fallen into Ling Han's hands, and whether he lived or died was completely at the latter's whim. He quickly said, "I know my mistake. I know my mistake." What a humiliation! An elite of the flower blossom tier would actually act so humble. Though people could not hear what Ling Han and Ji Yang said, simply looking at the submissive, servile display that Ji Yang was putting on, they were aware that he now wanted nothing more than to lick Ling Han's shoes. Disdainful. General clan, those that have heaven-tier cultivators? Ling Han rubbed his chin, then asked curiously, "Since your sea race is so powerful, why did they send someone like you?" Ji Yang was feeling very depressed. The martial arts level of this desolate north was not that high, even someone like him should be strong enough to do as he liked. He said, "I am one of the sea demon race, and am naturally proficient at bewitching. That lord from the general clan has no desire to create any great uproar, because that mineshaft is too strange. If there were many members of the sea race who died there, it may even attract the attention of the royal clan." "Then what exactly is the object that you seek?" Ling Han asked. Ji Yang hesitated slightly, then said, "It is said to be a vial, but I am not very sure. What is it used for?" "I don't know, either. All I know is that the Lord values it very much and has commanded me to do things quietly, but I must definitely obtain that vial." "Is the way you do things considered quiet?" Ling Han humphed, but when he thought about it, there was no communication between the seas and land. No matter how many people died on land, what relation did it have with the sea race? They would not care at all, so in this aspect, Ji Yang had really been doing things quietly. "Sir," Ji Yang said pitifully. His battle prowess was definitely considered top tier in the desolate north, but among the sea race, he could only be barely considered a strong cultivator. Thus, he did not have that kind of powerful aura, nor did he have the unyielding personality of a true elite cultivator. In other words, he was soft. Ling Han gave it some thought, then said, "You stay here with me for a while." He knocked Ji Yang unconscious with a single palm strike, then withdrew him into the Black Tower. Because of this member of the sea race, who knew how many humans had died, Ling Han naturally would not let him go so easily. However, he still wanted to ask Ji Yang for some more information about the sea race, and thus had no plans to kill the latter as of this moment. Seeing a flower blossom tier cultivator so easily dealt with by Ling Han, everyone's hearts were filled with anxiety. If Ling Han wanted to kill them, that would merely be as easy as flipping his hand over. Flower blossom tier cultivators had transcended mortality, and were inconceivably powerful. Ling Han looked at Bo Wenlin, smiled, and said, "Master Bo." "No. No." Bo Wenlin waved his hands quickly. If he was actually addressed by an elite cultivator of flower blossom tier cultivator as master, that was obviously like grilling him on top of an open fire. Ling Han said in displeasure, "Master Bo seems to like cutting off the words of others." Bo Wenlin really felt like dying. He simply did not want Ling Han to address him respectfully. What did he do wrong again? But when Ling Han said that, how could he dare to talk back? He merely shut his mouth obediently. "Come with me to see the Fire Emperor," Ling Han said, smiling. Bo Wenlin instantly hesitated. "It can't be that you're in the mood for some murder and want to kill even the Fire Emperor, right? Yi, didn't Master Bo say that you would follow me wherever I go?" "I remember very distinctly those were your exact words," Ling Han said, smiling. "The thing I hate most is those who go back on their words." "Do you want me to hate you?" Hunyo bared her teeth, killing intent soaring. Whomever Ling Han hated, she was very willing to use her little fists to smash him into pieces. With two flower blossom tier cultivators staring at him, what else could Bo Wenlin say? He could only say, "I am willing to go with you, sir." Ling Han smiled, then said, "Let's go then." After the three of them left, the others finally gasped in relief. All of them could feel a layer of cold sweat on their backs. The pressure exuded by flower blossom tear cultivators was really too terrifying. Such beings were on a completely different level from them. That powerful cultivator seems to be deliberately picking on Bo Wenlin. How did Old Nine of the Bo clan offend him? That can't be, right? If he really committed an offense, that elite cultivator needs only a finger to squish him to mush. I know, Bo Wenlin's son had previously made a move against that elite cultivator, yet was killed in the process. Old Nine of the Bo clan would naturally not let things slide, so he ran over to hunt down the elite cultivator, which is what led to the events after. I see. Looks like we all have to discipline the juniors in our own clans so that they won't inexplicably offend a powerful cultivator. That could really lead to death and ruin for the whole clan. That's right. They all sighed ruefully, and Ling Han had succeeded in his scheme. He was not simply torturing Bo Wenlin for fun, but was also using him to set an example so that these great clans that were used to being arrogant and condescending reflected on themselves and their own actions. In the wider world, there would always be someone stronger and more talented than themselves, so they should not be too arrogant in their ways. Getting back to the subject, Ling Han and the others were heading towards the Imperial Palace. They did not walk too fast, so by the time they arrived at the Imperial Palace, the entire Imperial Palace had entered into a state of emergency. There was a terrifying array already activated, as if they were prepared to face some great enemy. Halt! Someone yelled loudly. This is an important place of fire country, and it is forbidden for outsiders to enter. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I have something to say to the Fire Emperor. Tell him to come out, and we can all speak peacefully. Don't make me resort to force. In truth, I am one who dislikes using force and violence very much. The corner of Bo Wenlin's mouth twitched involuntarily, and he secretly mocked in his heart, then who was that guy whose motto was to use violence to enforce submission? Leave immediately. Another voice transmitted from the Imperial Palace. Now, everyone was well aware of how powerful Ling Han was. Who would dare shut down the protective array? Without the defenses provided by the array technique, how could they be able to stop an elite flower blossom tear cultivator? Even if that old emperor of fire country came, there was still a chance he might not be able to protect all of them. Ling Han clapped a hand onto Bo Wenlin's shoulder, smiled, and said, Do you all recognize this person? I will give you the time for 10 breaths, and if I still do not see the Rain Emperor by then, I will kill this guy. Bo Wenlin instantly shivered. How could the Fire Emperor possibly risk his life and appear for his sake? He was definitely going to die. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, I am only joking around with them. Bo Wenlin sighed in relief, thinking, I am really going to be broken from being played around by this guy. I will only cripple your 4 limbs, Ling Han continued. Ah. Bo Wenlin was again scared, and could not help but shudder again. Ari, you really don't know how to appreciate jokes. Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. It would be better if I just went straight ahead to break through the array technique and met the Fire Emperor directly. Ling Han looked ahead, activating the Eye of Truth. He began to observe this array technique in search for any weak points. By now, he was at least a 5th-tier array technique master. It was not possible for him to lay out a 6th-tier array technique now, but if it was merely to unravel one, it would be a piece of cake. After all, there was no one disturbing him now, so he could proceed with a calm and serene mindset. Chapter 529 Fire Country Yields. Chapter 529 Fire Country Yields. There was a large variety of array techniques. There were some that focused on bewitching the senses and were capable of imprisoning those caught in their threshold to their death. There were others that were killing arrays, and whoever entered would encounter an endless barrage of murderous traps. There were also some arrays that were mainly meant for defense and could be as sturdy as an iron barrel. Mountain protection great arrays typically focused on defense, and the one laid out for the Imperial Palace of Fire Country was as such. Though it was a 6th-tier array technique, it would be very difficult for even a spiritual infant-tier cultivator to force his way in. That was because once an opening was created in the defenses, it would very quickly close up. Thus, only if one was powerful enough to create a gigantic opening could he pass through calmly. That would at least have to be one in the middle period of the spiritual infant tier. Ling Han's battle prowess was indeed awesome, but he had yet to reach the point where he had broken through the restrictions of the spiritual infant tier. As a result, he could not possibly barge in through this massive great array technique by force. However, unraveling this array technique was a completely different story. With the use of the Eye of Truth, this array technique was practically exposed completely to his eyes. The easiest way to unravel the array is to destroy a few formations' eyes inside, but they are located within the array, so this solution contradicts itself, unless I have someone on the inside helping me. However, there is also another slightly more troublesome mean to unravel the array, and that is to attack several weak areas at the same time to create a temporary opening. Ling Han mumbled to himself, the sun, moon, and stars surprisingly appearing in his gaze. If I use Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow to strike against all 7 points at the same time, I'm sure I should be able to create a huge opening. He took a deep breath, his arms stretching out as if he was pulling a bowstring. Suddenly, 7 points of light appeared which transformed into 7 arrowheads. Then, the body of the arrows that seemed to be formed out of light also appeared, covered with multiple characters. They, too, did not belong to any of the current cultivation systems, and were exuding a terrifying ancient aura. The Eye of Truth combined with the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow, these two mystical powers teamed up together were practically the perfect match. For some reason, all those in the Imperial Palace felt an endless coldness surround them, as if they would suffer a very terrifying tragedy in the next moment. Xiao, the moment the 5 fingers of Ling Han's right hand loosened, 7 arrows of light immediately shot towards the great array. Once released, the 7 arrows of light shot towards 7 different directions, moving as fast as if they were shooting stars. No one could grasp the course they were traveling. With that kind of a shot, this would practically mean death for whoever was being aimed at. Because under normal conditions, who would keep a full-body defense of origin power over themselves? Wong, 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 the arrows shot out, but they did not hit the Imperial Palace directly. A protective screen appeared, blocking the advance of these arrows, but countless cracks appeared on this screen of light and it suddenly shattered as if it was made from fragile porcelain. Ling Han smiled. With his Eye of Truth, this great array could not even withstand a single strike. It was directly unraveled by his 1 bow and 7 arrows. Of course, this was also because the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow was exceptionally powerful. Otherwise, even if one managed to find the weak points, he might not be able to unravel the array, either. After all, these weak spots were only relatively weaker than the other areas, so how could they be broken through by simply any random attack? However, the formation's eyes for the array had not been destroyed, and with the continuous gathering of the surrounding spiritual qi, the reconstruction of the great array had begun. Let's go. Ling Han did not have the time to practice his archery skills here. He immediately picked Hu Niu up and entered the Imperial Palace. At this time, even if the great array was reactivated, there was not much use. Ling Han had already entered the array, and it would be considerably easier for him to unravel the array from within. He need only destroy the formation's eyes. What? He actually unraveled the array and came in? That can't be, can it? This great array is something that perhaps even an elite spiritual infant tier cultivator may not be able to break through. Everyone exclaimed in shock. This was really unbelievable to the masses. Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier, so how could he possibly be able to instantly unravel the protective array for the Imperial Palace? Could it be that this guy's battle prowess was even more terrifying than a spiritual infant tier cultivator's? What were they supposed to do now? Even their great protective array was rendered useless. Who else would be able to stop Ling Han now? Young friend, if there's anything you need to say, please say it to me. I believe that no matter how big the matter is, I would be in a position to make a decision. At this moment, an old man appeared. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s, seeming as if he could close his eyes in eternal sleep at the moment. There were actually flames raging upon his head. These were not real flames, but rather flames of martial intent. What did the appearance of flames of martial intent imply? Forcibly boosting life energy by burning up own life and martial intent would allow one to reach their best condition in the late period of their life. This was something that could not be helped. When a cultivator entered the elderly stage, his blood and breath would be exhausted, and battle prowess would no longer be as powerful as it used to be. Only by burning the flames of martial intent would they be able to rise to a higher level for a single battle. But doing so, no matter who the victor was, their vitality would be greatly damaged. They did not have that many years left to live in the first place, and doing so would cause their remaining lifespan to fall to rock bottom. It might even be possible that they could die directly after this battle. The old emperor. Everyone knelt down, incredibly reverent. This was the fire emperor of 4 generations ago, and also the only flower blossom tier cultivator of Fire Country. He forcibly broke through to the flower blossom tier with the aid of power of the nation, and only within Fire Country would he possess the lifespan of a flower blossom tier cultivator. Otherwise, the moment he left the country's boundaries, due to the fact that he had lived for close to 300 years, he was definitely going to immediately rot. In the desolate north, flower blossom tier cultivators were the divine tools whose duty was to protect the country and defend against external enemies. Ling Han was too powerful. One move was enough to unravel the great array, forcing the old emperor to appear. This had indeed reached the most critical time period for Fire Country. I only have one request: immediately stop excavation of that ancient mineshaft, Ling Han said. The old emperor looked slightly hesitant. That old mineshaft could allow cultivators of the spiritual pedestal tier see some hope of breaking through. It was the hope for a real breakthrough. What did that mean? It meant that there would appear more than one ultimate elites of the flower blossom tier in Fire Country. Then, Fire Country could definitely have a chance at sweeping aside all other 8 countries and bring the whole desolate north under its banner. More land and more citizens would lead to an even stronger power of the nation. Then, there would appear even more flower blossom tier cultivators in Fire Country. Even if the mineshaft had been emptied out, power of nation would not dry up, and the great empire of Fire Country would thus be passed on for many generations. There was too much involved in this, so the old emperor was naturally hesitant. All right, I agree. After merely a moment, the old emperor nodded in assent. If they could not even manage to get through this dilemma they were currently facing, what was the point of deliberating about their future? Ling Han said calmly, I hope you are not giving me a half-hearted agreement. If you are, he drew out the demon birth sword, and with a wave, 19 flashes of sword chi shot out. Every flash of sword chi was covered with simple, ancient characters. They were the bone marks he had obtained from the old mongoose, and could compound one's attack. They could practically be considered a mystical power on their own. His slash shot out at the skies, and a terrifying scene appeared. It was as if even the sky itself had cracked, and there actually appeared a black, empty void. Too terrifying, the power behind this slash was so strong it was unfathomable. Everyone could not help but shiver in fear. That was 19 flashes of sword chi. Was this guy really human? 10 flashes of chi would be considered to be a ruler at the very apex, so what kind of concept was 19 flashes? In the flower blossom tier, he was definitely invincible. This time, the old emperor had completely abandoned any naive ideas of falsely agreeing to Ling Han's request, letting time drag on. When 8 or 10 flower blossom tier cultivators appeared out of Fire Country, he'd stand against Ling Han then. But now, he realized that even if there were 80 or 100 flower blossom tier cultivators, they would only be delivering themselves up to die, what more 8 or 10 of them? I would not dare. He made sure his attitude and tone was most humble. Ling Han nodded, turned, and left. He wanted to properly interrogate that Nag Yang. Chapter 530, The Jade Vial. Chapter 530, The Jade Vial. Ling Han arrived at the city gates, then entered the Black Tower with Hu Niu and began Nag Yang's interrogation. He wanted to know more information about the sea race. Inside the Black Tower, there was even less of a chance for Nag Yang to put up a resistance. Whatever Ling Han asked, he would answer honestly, not daring to make the slightest attempt at deception. That member of the general clan that Nag Yang was under the command of was named Xian Kongyun. The Xian clan was an extremely powerful existence among the general clans of the Northern Sea. Xian Kongyun, who was in the deity transformation tier, was an important character of that clan. According to Nag Yang's private investigations, He was very ambitious. Why had Xian Kongyun not sent anyone, and instead only chose to send Na Zhiyang alone to perform this mission? Firstly, because Na Zhiyang had a special ability. Sea demons were born exceptionally proficient at bewitchment, and could send their enemies' soldiers back without even a fight. They might even be able to confound someone so much that their victim was not even aware he was being bewitched. For example, the Fire Emperor should be aware of the consequences of forcibly excavating the ancient mine. That was something that could weaken the foundations of a country and bring ruin to the whole power of the nation. Yet he still chose to obstinately cling to his course, fantasizing about the wonderful future he had as a flower blossom tear cultivator. One reason for that was indeed the great temptation the mineshaft held, and another was greatly due to Na Zhiyang's bewitchment. Secondly, because Xian Kongyun obviously did not want to alert any others, not even the own clansmen, about the ancient mineshaft and the mysterious vial. He must have read about it in some ancient classical book, and wanted to claim sole possession of it. This was something that could be confirmed based on the fact that he had only sent Na Zhiyang. Only one person. It would be extremely easy to kill him to keep him from talking. Ling Han's curiosity was spiked even further. A treasure that could make an elite cultivator in the deity transformation tier make such painstaking efforts just to attain it definitely had to be of incredible value. It was certain that that vial was definitely the cursed tool that Small Tower had mentioned, but what exactly was it used for? It was simple, he only had to dig it out. Ling Han had an extremely tough natal horoscope, and added with the presence of the Black Tower, there was absolutely no need for him to worry about being cursed. He could really go wherever and do whatever he liked in the ancient mine. Additionally, he also had one other thing to do, and that was to bring the miners into the Black Tower so that he could clean the effects of the curse on them. He arrived at the old mineshaft. At this moment, the Imperial Guards had already rushed over, bringing with them the Imperial decree of the Fire Emperor. They would soon close up the old mine, and would obey Ling Han's commands. Ling Han had all the miners gather at the upper level. Then, he activated the aura of the Flower Blossom tier to knock all of them unconscious before he took them into the Black Tower. He then left the old mine and threw them all out. As for the question when they would regain consciousness, or what reaction they would have, Ling Han couldn't care less. Young Master Han, you really can't stand against Master Kongyun. Na Zhiyang was practically ready to begin bawling. I have to make a progress report to Master Kongyun every 10 days, and tomorrow is the scheduled day for my report. Master Kongyun is already very displeased with the current progression rate. If things continue to be delayed, it can't be guaranteed that Master Kongyun would not come personally. By then, we'll all be in big trouble. That was an elite deity transformation tier cultivator. With a mere thought, he could crush a spiritual infant tier cultivator to death. No matter how monstrous Ling Han was, there was no way he would be able to fight back against such an existence. So soon. Ling Han frowned. If an elite deity transformation tier cultivator really came, what was he supposed to do to resist? After so many days, the two corpses of divine beings had already lost too much immortal level pressure. By now, they most probably would only be capable of suppressing a flower blossom tier cultivator, and that was practically useless for him. Did he still need help in standing against a flower blossom tier cultivator? Young Master Han, for the sake of our lives, please don't interfere in this matter. You are not capable of interfering, either, Na Zhiyang advised. Furthermore, he suspected that the vial, which even a deity transformation tier cultivator like Sai Kongyun placed so much importance on, had to have effects even superior to the level of deity transformation tier. If so, it definitely had to be incredibly awesome. If the news about the vial was leaked, perhaps even the royal clan would make a move on it. Ling Han shook his head. There was no way he could allow excavation of this old mine to continue, but he could not ignore the threat that a deity transformation tier cultivator could pose, either. So why not do it this way? He would obtain that cursed tool and have that deity transformation tier cultivator hunt him down instead. Anyways, he was planning to head to the central prefecture. There was a natural barrier separating the various zones, and if a deity transformation tier cultivator headed that way, his power would be seriously weakened. Furthermore, deity transformation tier cultivators could really not be considered particularly powerful there. Decided, then. Ling Han had been planning to dig out that cursed tool in the first place, so naturally, it was now an even more urgent matter on his agenda. He returned to the old mine and journeyed deep within, beginning his search with Hu Niu by his side. The old mine was a very special place. The aura of the cursed tool soared within like wisps of blood, preventing divine sense from spreading out. This caused Ling Han to have no way to investigate objects that were too far a distance away from him. But because he knew that the vial could possibly be the source of this cursed qi, Ling Han knew what he had to do, and that was to head to the area where the cursed qi was strongest. When he found it, he then had to begin digging. On the matter of digging, he definitely was more efficient than 10,000 miners put together. What kind of power did the flower blossom tear possess? Be it stone or dirt, they would be easily pierced through. Furthermore, there was no need for him to expend unnecessary effort to move out the dirt he had dug out, either, since he could simply toss it all into the Black Tower. The space inside was overwhelmingly huge. Who knew how many mountain ranges or oceans he could store inside? His efficiency rate was thus incredibly high, of course. After merely less than half a day's time, the aura soaring up from the ground was as crimson as blood, and upon contact, his skin would immediately turn blood red in color. A powerful urge to commit violence and bloodshed would rise up in his heart, with a desire to kill all living creatures. This effect was very big, and in a short while, both Ling Han and Hu Niu felt incredible pressure. They hurriedly entered into the Black Tower to take a break. This is not the power of the curse, rather, it is possible that the ultimate cultivator who had died here had a violent nature. As time passed, it continued to affect the area here, Small Tower said. Ling Han frowned, and said, "What you mean is, that this place not only contains a cursed tool, there could also possibly be the body of an ultimate cultivator buried here. Mayhap that person was killed by that cursed tool," Small Tower deduced. After staying inside the Black Tower for a long time, the violent urge in their bodies finally vanished, and the two once again left the Black Tower and continued digging. Hu Niu was naturally a good hand at it since her little claws were extremely sharp. What a powerful resentment! After digging for over a dozen minutes, Ling Han got a sudden shock and felt as if something had entered into his body. It was a strange feeling, and made him feel threatened for some reason. Was this the power of the curse? It would not immediately take one's life, but would have imperceptible influence, and finally cause one to die suddenly. Vile! Hu Niu exclaimed, pointing at the ground. Ling Han nodded. The opening of a vial was exposed there, so he hurriedly continued to dig. Soon enough, the whole vial was out in the open. It was only about a foot tall and very slender. It was made out of jade. Even if it had been buried underground for many years, it was not the slightest bit damaged. There was a large number of designs on the body of the vial. It should be some kind of martial intent that was related to curses. He wanted to pick up the jade vial, but when he tried, he actually found out that he was not able to pick it up. Was it rooted to the ground? He increased the force he was exerting, and the jade vial was finally picked up. However, once it left the ground, a blood-colored fountain gushed forth, and an extremely terrifying aura spread out in all directions. Even if Ling Han had the divine sense of the heaven tier, he felt a shiver as if a great catastrophe was about to happen. Let's go. He put away the jade vial, hurriedly picked Hu Niu up, and flew upwards. Chapter 531, Variants. Chapter 531, Variants. Hong, the blood-colored fountain was getting increasingly fiercer. At first, it was merely about as wide as an arm, but soon grew to be as wide as an adult man, and eventually as tall as a well. Finally, it became like a natural geyser, waves of blood soaring to the skies as if it meant to flood the whole world. Ling Han flew upwards all the way. Underneath him was the quickly rising water level. It was practically hot on his heels. Z, with its terrifying erosive properties, his shoes began to corrode, followed by his socks. The soles of his feet also became extraordinarily itchy as layer after layer of skin peeled off, as if even his blood and flesh was going to be melted, with only his skeleton left behind. This was really too scary. Merely a little steam evaporated from the liquid had this level of erosive properties. Then if he was really swallowed up by the wave of blood, could he still survive? One had to know that he was one who was cultivating the indestructible heaven scroll, and his physical body was on par with precious metals of the same level. If it was any other flower blossom tear cultivator in his place, he'd probably be melted down into a puddle of bloody water now. Ling Han quickly drew Hu Niu into the Black Tower, and continued to fly upwards with all his might. Could it be that the ground was actually a huge array, and the jade vial was the formation's eye, its heart? Now that he had extracted the formation's eye, the huge array stopped functioning, and whatever was being suppressed inside immediately appeared. Then hadn't he caused a huge problem? Thankfully, everyone who was here had evacuated. Otherwise, the miners who had been here would have been swallowed up by this ocean of blood. Peng, Ling Han flew up to the skies, and soon reached a spot right above the old mine. The pillar of blood soared to the skies and reached at least 100 feet in height before it began to fall back down. Great amounts of bloody water surged forth, and the whole ancient mine had become a lake in a mere instant. As far as the eye could see, it was a stretch of blood red. Ling Han stood on the banks of the lake and held his breath. There was a strong smell of iron coming from this bloody water, as if a great massacre had just occurred. The smell was particularly strong, making even him feel as if he was about to transform into a great monster that wanted to slaughter all in this world. Was this really blood? If it was, then how many people would have to die to create such an overwhelming amount? Ling Han could not help but feel his hair stand on ends. He was very clear how colossal the old mine was, but he had absolutely no estimate of the size of the space sealed beneath the jade vial. But to fill up merely the whole space inside the old mine, perhaps the blood of even 10 million might not be enough. You guessed wrongly. At most, there is only the blood of about a dozen people, Small Tower piped up. How could that be? Ling Han immediately exclaimed in shock. If the amount here was only the blood of about a dozen people, then how big would these people have to be? The size of a mountain. The higher the ability of a cultivator, the more blood they possess. A little blood would be enough to form a sea by itself. What is there to be so shocked about? Small Tower countered. The blood here originates from over a dozen different sources, so at most, it must have come from over a dozen people. Ling Han was just about to speak when he paused. He saw a flash of white light appear in the lake of blood, which was soon followed by the appearance of a white-colored corpse floating on the waters, causing ripples to appear on the surface. It was a man, and when he had been alive, he had definitely been extremely handsome. At this moment, he was dressed entirely in white, with a wound on his chest that had caused his heart to explode directly in his chest. Another corpse appeared. This one was a bald man who wore clay-yellow clothing. There were actually 9 dots marked on his head, and he wore a string of beads on his chest. His attire was extremely strange. He, too, had a hole in his chest, which showed that his heart had burst directly from the wound. Is this the so-called ancient monk? Ling Han had heard of how the ancient monks dressed. They gave up meat and fish and forbade killing of any sort. They were bound by strict monastic commandments. The third corpse appeared. This one was a girl of unsurpassed beauty. She wore a long red skirt, which merged with the bloody water. It was not possible to distinguish where the skirt ended and the bloody water began. She did not die from having her heart crushed, but there was a bloody hole on her jade-like forehead, which had caused her lamentable death. This was really a captivating beauty. Anyone who saw her would feel the urge to sigh in pity at her death. She was soon followed by the fourth corpse. Ling Han took count. There was a total of 12 corpses. They seemed to have been suppressed underground before, and now, they were all released in one go. Ling Han was extremely clear how terrifying the erosive abilities this bloody water had. However, though these corpses had been buried for a few centuries, or even a few millennia, they had not rotted at all. Then, how powerful had these people been when they were still alive? Could heaven-tier cultivators be this strong? Ling Han was unsure. He now only possessed a sliver of the heaven-tier divine sense, and could only make a rough deduction about those who might have been on the same cultivation level as he had once been. He was not able to obtain a definite answer. Perhaps, these people might possibly even have been in the shattering void tier. The problem was, although these people had all died from fatal blows to varying critical points, they shared a common feature, and that was that they had all been struck fatally by fists. They had their heart crushed or head pierced through by a punch as if they were facing an unsurpassed god, their only destiny to die in an instant. The blood of these 12 ultimate elites combined to form this lake of blood. What? A shocked expression appeared on Ling Han's face. There actually emerged a silver-colored spider the size of a mountain on the surface of the lake. Every single leg was like a divine spear, the aura exuding from it incredibly terrifying, making him feel as if he was made of fragile porcelain that, with the current barrage of aura, was beginning to crack. This was no illusion. Ling Han looked down and could feel multiple cracks appearing on his hands. At this moment, beads of blood emerged from these cracks, and there were more and more appearing. They formed a straight line and dripped downwards without end. Too terrifying. He was merely standing here at such a big distance, and it was enough to make him feel like he was about to collapse. Heaven-tier cultivators could not reach this level of power, and this world only allowed power up to shattering void tier level. Thus, this silver spider definitely had to be of the shattering void tier level. This giant silver spider merely glanced at Ling Han yet did not have any expression at all. It behaved high and mighty, as if it was an invincible creature. It did indeed have no need to look at Ling Han in contempt, because both parties were not on the same level at all. Just like how Ling Han would look at a common man, did he need to treat the other with contempt to reflect his superior might? It was merely a sweeping glance, and Ling Han felt as if his body was about to be crushed. His spirit similarly felt like it was about to burst. Perhaps Ling Han had to return to the heaven tier to be able to stand strong against this kind of aura, and that was merely the aura. Hong, it was at this moment a gigantic whirlpool appeared in the lake of blood. The waters immediately began to sink, and the speed was gradually increasing. Within a few breaths' time, the waters of the lake of blood had completely disappeared, and these 12 corpses had naturally disappeared with them. The silver spider stretched its colossal 8 legs and shrank in size before becoming a streak of light. With a shio, it leaped into the mineshaft, and could no longer be seen. What was up with this old mine? Ling Han frowned deeply. At the beginning, he had only thought that a cursed tool had been buried here, or perhaps it was a great ultimate cultivator that had affected this piece of land. However, though he had indeed obtained a cursed tool, 12 corpses that had been extremely mighty in their lifetimes had also appeared. Furthermore, there was also a giant silver spider that he suspected was still alive. He couldn't even be sure if that was a false image from eons ago or a real creature. With power to that extent, he naturally had no way to get near it, and thus, of course, no way to study it closely. Chapter 532, Trying Out the Cursed Tool. Chapter 532, Trying Out the Cursed Tool. At first, he had thought that all the mysteries would be solved once the mine was completely excavated, but who knew that even more riddles would emerge. The bloody waters had completely vanished, and peace returned to the old mine. However, Ling Han was not the slightest bit at peace. He sensed that there were still great many secrets hidden in this world. In his last life, he had indeed explored numerous ancient sites, but in terms of level, this time could be considered number 2. The first on the list was naturally when he encountered the Black Tower, which had crushed him directly. Moreover, Small Tower would frequently act thunder and say that it could destroy this entire world with a single move. Ling Han entered into the Black Tower. Since he was not able to figure things out for the moment, he'd first deal with that vial. Small Tower, what is this thing? He asked. A cursed tool, Small Tower said calmly, appearing out of nowhere. This tool spirit had always been very thunder. Whatever it saw, it would think it was inferior to itself by uncountable levels. What made Ling Han feel even more depressed was that was indeed the fact, so he didn't even have the chance to crack down on Small Tower. How do I use it? Ling Han felt no shame in continuing his questions. Small Tower said, if you want to curse someone, then take something from his body, like hair or a fingernail. Then, place it in the vial. Do you see the designs on the body of the vial? Those represent the effects of the curse. For example, illness, berserk, madness, death, misfortune. Whatever curse you want to lay, Activate the corresponding designs. Blood, flesh, hair, and skin have close relations with the main body, and would be able to have effect even if there was a distance of 10,000 miles. Ling Han was surprised. He had initially thought that these designs were martial intent, but had not thought that they actually symbolized the button to curse someone. He thought for a moment and could not help but be astonished, asking, then if that's the case, someone would only need to take my hair, fingernail, or blood that I had just shed and would be able to lay a curse on me. Naturally. Small Tower nodded. Therefore, please be as cautious as possible. However, curses vary from person to person. The stronger your ability, and the tougher your natal horoscope, the higher level the cursed tool or the curse master needs to be to successfully lay a curse on you. Ling Han nodded. From now onwards, he would take care. Who knew if he would be secretly targeted by some curse master one day? Would this cursed tool be able to take effect on a deity transformation tier cultivator? A thought flashed in his head. If it was not able to even do so much, then what did Shen Kong Mind want this thing for? Perhaps even heaven tier or shattering void tier cultivators would be affected. This cursed tool had been suppressing 12 extremely terrifying ancient corpses. Moreover, there was still that mountain-sized silver spider, which might be greatly related as well. We'll do an experiment first. Ling Han summoned Na Yang over and said, pluck out a hair for me. Young Master Han, may I know what you need my hair for? Na Yang asked in bafflement as he handed him the hair. How could Na Yang possibly dare resist? It was only a single hair, it wasn't that he had to sell off his an asterisk S. Ling Han smiled and tossed the hair into the vial. Then, he shook the jade vial and asked, do you find this familiar? Familiar? Na Yang was confused. It was only a vial. Could it be that Ling Han had taken it from his residence? But he did not have the slightest bit of memory about it. Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, I advise you to have some mental preparation. He pressed a finger down onto a design, and inserted a small amount of origin power as per what Small Tower said. Immediately, this design was activated. It was as if it was brought to life, and a flower actually grew out from the vial. Young Master Han, is this a magic trick? Na Yang could not help but ask. It couldn't be anything but that, right? He simply took a strand of hair from him and tossed it into the vial, and as a result, a flower actually bloomed out? What else could it be but a magic trick? But in that case, should he clap his hands to please Ling Han? Ayo. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Why do I feel a bit of a stomachache? This was really inconceivable. Flower blossom tier cultivators had transcended mortality and could not possibly fall ill, unless they were poisoned. But he did not think that he had eaten anything odd, so how could it be possible that he had been poisoned? Young Master Han, however, his stomachache was getting increasingly fiercer, and instantly, it was like a deluge of pain was coming from his stomach, causing him to twist his legs together. Please allow me to take my leave. I need to relieve myself and I will come pay my respects later. It had taken effect so quickly. Ling Han remembered what Small Tower had said. How fast the effects of the curse would appear completely depended on the level of the cursed tool as well as the cultivation of the one laying the curse and the difference between the curses and the cursed person's natal horoscope. The greater the difference, the faster the effects would appear, and vice versa. If, on the other hand, the cursed person's natal horoscope was tougher than that of the person laying the curse, it would not be possible for the curse to be successful. This was really a good item to use in a sneak attack. Ling Han laughed and halted the inflow of origin power. The design that had lit up on the vial immediately dimmed, and that flower vanished as well. My stomach doesn't hurt anymore? Na Yang asked confusedly. This was really incomprehensible. The abdominal pain had come so suddenly, and vanished in a similarly sudden manner as well. If this had happened to an ordinary person, it could perhaps be believed, but it could not possibly happen to one who was in the flower blossom tier. He looked at Ling Han in shock, and exclaimed, Young Master Han, is this something that you did? Ling Han smiled calmly and said, experience it one more time. He activated yet another design. Young Master Han, what do you want to do to me? Na Yang's face had turned green in shock, What damnable thing was this? In merely an instant, his face was as pale as dying embers, and he laid his forehead on the ground. Then, he declared in despair, someone like me should not live in this world at all. Gods, please let down a bolt of lightning to strike me to death. I am a smelly bug, a piece of trash that cannot even be considered a smelly bug. Awesome, even a flower blossom tear cultivator was cursed to the extent that he had lost all will to live. One had to understand that no matter the living being, survival was their first priority. This was pure instinct. But now, it seemed as if his instinct had been completely torn away. How utterly terrifying. Ling Han once again stopped. Nag Yang instantly jumped up, his face twitching uncontrollably. An alarmed, inconsolable expression was on his face. Too terrifying. This was really too terrifying. Just now, he actually felt as if all his hopes had turned to dust and wanted nothing more but to die just to end everything. But now that he thought about it, what reason did he have to seek death? It was precisely because of this that he could not help but shiver in fear. This move of Ling Han was practically defying logic. Ling Han turned over the jade vial and saw that there was only half a strand of hair remaining inside. To curse another would simultaneously use up the item he used to lay the curse. It was impossible that he would be able to use it without end. Nag Yang suddenly came to realization, and asked, This is the jade vial that Master Kongyun is seeking. It could only be this kind of treasure that would entice Shen Kongyun. He had not realized it before. He had busied himself on this matter for almost half a year's time, yet how long had Ling Han come for? He actually found something that he had worked so hard to find. This naturally caused him to completely not realize that it could be the jade vial he was tasked to find. Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, I'll assign you a task. Nag Yang was filled with fear and trepidation. Just how capable was he? It was obvious that Ling Han would not give him something easy to do. He gathered his courage and asked, May I know what is your command, young Master Han? Ling Han smiled slightly and replied, Very simple. Inform that Shen Kongyun that the matter about the jade vial is about to conclude, and that you will personally meet him to make your report. And while you're at it, steal some of his hair, scales, and fingernails for me. In short, anything that naturally grew from his body would do. Nag Yang's face turned green with fear. Ling Han was planning to pull a fast one on Shen Kongyun. Chapter 533 Army Above the Sea. Chapter 533 Army Above the Sea. Do you intend to refuse? Ling Han asked, smiling. Without waiting for him to answer, Ling Han plucked a bunch of hair from his head, then picked a single strand and threw it into the jade vial. He thought he'd just name it the Vial of Curses, then said, You have to consider carefully. This was no way to threaten someone. Nag Yang wanted to weep but had no tears. The previous 2 times he had been cursed left a lingering fear in his heart, especially the second time when he directly lost all will to live on. Now that he recalled it, it was really too terrifying. Obviously, Ling Han merely needed to obtain a single item from his body to enable him to activate a curse. And now Ling Han had taken a whole bunch of hair from him, so who knew how many times Ling Han could kill him with that? Furthermore, who said that stomachache and desire to die were the only effects of the curse? No. To be able to do something for young Master Han would be my honor, Nag Yang immediately proclaimed, his expression filled with a strong sense of righteousness. Ling Han patted his shoulder, and said, Not bad. This is what I wanted to hear. As a person, you have to be brighter, and more loyal to your friends. Yes, young Master Han is right. Nag Yang exclaimed earnestly. Ling Han knocked him unconscious with a single smack, then took him out of the Black Tower. Though he had the cursed tool to hold over Nag Yang's head, if he could avoid the secret of the Black Tower from being known, Ling Han still chose to do so. After he brought Nag Yang back to the Imperial City, Ling Han smacked him back to consciousness, and said, Go on. Oh, right. Don't think that you will not be affected once you run far away enough. 3 days later, I will let you experience more fun. Young Master Han, I believe you. There's no more need to test it out. Nag Yang hurriedly waved his hands. How could that be allowed? If we don't test things out, how could my sincerity be proven? Ling Han asked in displeasure. Fine, threatening someone could still be categorized into being sincere or insincere. Naj Yang could only leave obediently. He definitely had to complete this task. Only that way would he get a chance of survival. If Shen Kongyun died, then naturally no one would know what he had done. Curse someone to death? Haha, who would believe that something like that was possible? Just like how he previously desired only to die, even if he really had died, who would believe that he had actually been murdered? However, he did indeed have some doubt. From a great distance away, would that thing still really be able to curse him? He definitely had to confirm this fact. Otherwise, when he successfully conned Shen Kongyun yet the latter was not cursed to death, Naj Yang was still definitely going to die. In the following 3 days, he put all his energies into speeding up his travel, aiming to leave Ling Han as far away as possible in order to test if that treasure was really capable of imperceptibly killing another from miles away. He soon entered into the sea, and did not choose to soar through the skies. The moment he entered the sea, his legs actually miraculously vanished and became a long fish tail. With a strong flick, his speed instantly spiked. He swam towards the deepest parts of the ocean, and was much faster than when he'd been soaring above the land. The sea race were indeed suited to live in the sea. Only in the sea could their battle prowess be maximized. The seabed was very dark, but for a flower blossom tear cultivator, this was nothing. On his way, various scenes that were familiar to him appeared, and so did various types of sea race. Though flower blossom tear beings could not be considered the topmost elite in the sea race, they could still be ranked as one of the elites. Thus, on his way, there was a considerable number of sea race people that paid him their respects. There were also some young girls of the sea race who threw him coy glances like mad. The sea demon race were known for their captivating beauty, so he naturally attracted countless young girls. Just when Master Na was feeling very pleased with their attention, a scene that engendered much curiosity appeared. Master Na suddenly flopped onto the seabed head first, and with bubbles gurgling from his mouth, said, "I am a smelly bug, just let me die." It was really a scene that caused a number of people to pop their eyes out in shock. It took effect. All of a sudden, Naj Yang felt feelings too complex to unravel. There was only one thought in his mind: he definitely had to complete the task that Ling Han had assigned him, or he was definitely going to die. Ling Han did not think about Naj Yang and Shen Kongyun for the moment. Anyways, if Naj Yang could manage to bring back some hair or skin from Shen Kongyun, then he'd just curse the latter to death. If he couldn't, then he'd simply head straight to the middle state, and just let the latter chase him. He returned home. After so many days away, he naturally wanted to spend some quality time with his family. If he could manage to resolve completely the matter of the sea race, then there would be no need for the Ling clan to move. If he could not, then it would be best for them to relocate elsewhere. Liu Yutong and the other girls were gentle in every possible way. However, Zhu Xian'er's injury had already recovered a number of days, so there was no more reason for her to delay things further. As a result, she begged her leave to deliver the medicine back to the Half-Moon sect. After that, she would directly head to Extreme Yang City and wait for Ling Han to arrive. After a few days, he headed to the Imperial City again because he had agreed upon a meeting with Naj Yang after 10 days. After staying in the Imperial City for a day, Naj Yang returned. He delivered up a sack, and said, "Young Master Han, I only managed to obtain 3 scales that Master Kongyun had shed." He was afraid Ling Han would be displeased, and hurriedly continued, "Master Kongyun is a parting waters beast from ancient times. The scales he sheds are priceless materials for forging protective armor, so they are very difficult to obtain." Ling Han smiled and said, "That's all right. As long as these scales have been shed from his body, they should do." He knocked Naj Yang unconscious and drew him into the Black Tower. Then, he took out the vial of curses, crushed a single scale a bit, and stuffed it inside the vial. After that, he directly activated the curse of death. Instantly, a flower bloomed. This meant that the curse had been successfully placed. Otherwise, if the person cursed was of too high a level, or had too tough a natal horoscope, which caused the curse not to take effect, then this flower would not bloom at all. A high and mighty deity transformation tier elite was killed with a curse just like that from miles away? Ling Han felt coldness rise from his heart. There really was a multitude of rare and bizarre techniques in this world. Who knew if there would be some other kinds of power that could also similarly kill a person from a great distance away, just like the Vial of Curses. However, this kind of technique would definitely have its own limitations. Actually, if one was careful enough, it was still possible to dodge it. Since the curse was successful, Ling Han returned home, and decided to stay for another 2 months before heading to Extreme Yang City and join up with Ying Hong and Zhu Xian'er before they all traveled to the Middle State. However, his days of peace only lasted for half a month. This day, a wave suddenly rose up on the sea, which then led to great chaos. Though the Ling clan had little contact with the outside world, there would still be a few clansmen who moved around outside. It was soon discovered that in recent days, refugees had appeared in the town. Furthermore, their numbers were increasing gradually. When they asked these refugees, they found out that troops had appeared above the sea, sweeping through all obstacles in their way, heading directly in the direction of the imperial city. Troops above the sea? Ling Han was astounded. Could it be that Shen Kong Yun had not died? Still, wasn't this guy extremely low-key? How could he suddenly appear on such a grand scale? He brought along Hu Niu and rushed towards the imperial city. When he arrived, that huge army had not yet reached there. Thus, he headed in the direction of the sea, and after a day's travel, the troops above the sea were finally visible. They didn't seem much different from human troops, but all were foot soldiers. They numbered about 1,000, and ahead of them, there was a unit carrying flags. They all wore scaled armor, which was a bit different from a normal army. Their weapons were mostly made up of long spears and battle axes. Aside from that, there was a considerable number of those who had webbed hands and webbed feet. They did not wear shoes, so it was easily visible. The Sea Race. Chapter 534, Princess of the Sea Race. Chapter 534, Princess of the Sea Race. The army only numbered slightly over 1,000, but the minimum level of the soldiers was in the spiritual pedestal tier. Furthermore, there was only a single vehicular carriage pulled by 2 seahorses. Ancient patterns decorated the walls of the carriage, and there were also a great many holes that had been created from being pierced by weapons. However, they did not affect the grandeur of this carriage, but rather made it look even more aged and majestic. When Ling Han's eyes turned in that direction, his mind suddenly blanked out. He could only see a gigantic hand appear out of thin air which aimed to grab him. This humongous hand was really too terrifying. It was as if even if the sky itself collapsed, this colossal hand would be able to support it with a mere lift. But upon close examination, this was actually a female's hand, the skin as smooth and fair as snow, close to perfection. Too powerful. Ling Han did not have a second thought. He directly took Hu Niu and ducked into the Black Tower, his heart throbbing wildly. Though it was only a single instant, that had been the most dangerous instant he had experienced in this lifetime. If he had been the slightest bit slower, he would definitely have been grabbed by that gigantic hand, and would definitely not have a chance of entering into the Black Tower. A high-level heaven tier, or perhaps even shattering void tier. Ling Han shook his head. He was not able to deduce that person's true power at all. He merely had a sliver of divine sense left over from the heaven tier. Perhaps he could still see through the cultivation level of a normal heaven tier cultivator, but in the case of a high-level heaven tier cultivator, they would be a complete mystery even to him. Moreover, there were actually shattering void tier cultivators amongst the sea race. However, he could confirm one fact, and that was that the elite cultivator inside the carriage could not possibly be Shen Kong Yunhe, was merely in the deity transformation tier. An exclamation of surprise arose from within the carriage. "Mistress, is there something wrong?" a warrior from the sea race immediately asked. "There's a very interesting troublemaker," the person inside the carriage replied. Her voice was seductive, as if it possessed an endless entrancing ability. The gaze of that warrior of the sea race fluctuated as if he wanted to seek out the troublemaker the princess, Her Highness, had mentioned, but how could he possibly discover the existence of the Black Tower? Thus, he was naturally unsuccessful. He teleported, the person in the carriage said, but then mumbled softly to herself, had he really teleported? I don't recall feeling any shifting of space. But if it wasn't teleportation, then how could he have possibly vanished all of a sudden? The wheels of the carriage rolled, and this army continued its advance towards the imperial city. It was only when this huge army had completely disappeared from sight that Ling Han and Hu Niu emerged back out of the Black Tower. Scared Niu to death. That woman is very powerful, Hu Niu exclaimed, patting her chest in relief. Ling Han nodded. This was one of the greatest people of the sea race, strong to an inconceivable level. Could it be that Nag Yang left behind some loose ends? Otherwise, after he had cursed Xian Kongyun to death, this whole matter should have ended, so how could it be that a whole army of sea race would appear now and with them, an inconceivably powerful woman? An ultimate cultivator that might be a high-level heaven tier cultivator, or perhaps even in the shattering void tier. If she chose to do as she liked in a place like the North region, who could stand in her way? Ling Han drew Nag Yang out, and narrated to him what had happened previously. Then, he asked, who is that woman? Also, whom else did you speak to about this matter? Nag Yang was almost on the brink of tears. How could he dare to reveal this kind of secret to anyone? If it was known to the sea race that he was involved in Xian Kongyun's death by curse, then wouldn't he be torn to pieces? He answered in a trembling voice, that person should be the 7th princess of the royal clan, Lady Helian Zun Shui. What cultivation level is she at? Ling Han questioned. Apparently, the heaven tier. Nag Yang gave it some thought, then said with a note of certainty, she should be in the heaven tier. The 7th princess is the most prodigious genius of the Helian royal clan, but has not yet advanced into the shattering void tier. Ling Han had heard him talk about it before. There was a total of 3 great royal clans in the Northern Sea. They were Helian, Xianyu, and Wenren. All 3 had an ultimate cultivator of the shattering void tier in their ranks, and they were equivalent to a great sect from the middle state in terms of power. Even if Helian Zun Shui was not in the shattering void tier and was only in the heaven tier, she would be more than adequate to sweep aside all resistance in the North region. Furthermore, Ling Han felt that she was far stronger than he had been in his last life. As for the question of whether she was on par with the Sword Emperor and the others, this was not so easily gauged. That was because he had not even seen her face to face. From the look of things, she should have come for the vial of curses. Otherwise, she would not have appeared so coincidentally at this moment. But since Nag Yang did not leak the secret, how had she known about it? Could it be that Xian Kongyun leaked the information to her just before his death? Ling Han thought for a moment, then once again knocked Nag Yang out and threw him back into the Black Tower. Then, he, too, headed towards the imperial city. Taking a different route, he surpassed the army of sea race, and arrived in the imperial city ahead of them. Honestly speaking, this army was not really advancing very quickly. However, no matter how slow they were, another 2 days later, the sea race had still arrived outside the imperial city. Everyone in Fire Country felt like they were facing a great calamity. Upon the city walls, every soldier had a sword in hand or an arrow mounted on their bow, and war seemed about to begin at any moment. However, in front of an army where the lowest level was the spiritual pedestal tier, any resistance seemed futile. This shouldn't really be considered as an army, but rather Helian Zun Shui's private guard. After all, their numbers amounted to too few to be considered an army. I don't care who obtained that item. Hand it over immediately. Otherwise, 3 days later, I will incite a great tsunami wave and flood the whole of the desolate north. From within the carriage, Helian Zun Shui's melodious yet cold voice could be heard. She released a sliver of her aura, and instantly, even the skies changed color. Pa, 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 pa. All dropped their weapons, and aside from those who were in the ranks of rulers for martial arts, were forced to their knees. Everyone was in a state of extreme shock. The battle had not even begun, and things were already like this. The enemy was so strong one could only shiver at their might. What were they to do? They had absolutely no idea what item she was talking about, so how were they supposed to hand it over? When they thought about it, they were really having a bout of extreme bad luck. Just some days ago, Someone charged into the imperial palace and forced them to agree to an unjust treaty which was a great humiliation to them. And now, someone else charged into the imperial city and threatened them. Yet they could not show the slightest bit of their infuriation. Though the woman inside the carriage had not even shown her face, no one dared to doubt her words. She merely released a bit of her aura, and it was enough to have everyone know that she was definitely not joking. She had that kind of power, and at the same time, would really do as she had said. Linghan frowned. Now, he could absolutely confirm that the item she wanted was the vial of curses. After slight hesitation, he had Hunyo enter into the Black Tower first, then ascended up the city walls. "Milord, milord, milord." When they saw Linghan, everyone knelt down as if they had seen their savior. Linghan laughed, and said, "Don't look at me. Now, even if there were 10,000 of me, it still wouldn't be enough to stand against a single finger of hers." When they heard Linghan say that, everyone wore disappointed expressions. Even Linghan was no match for her, so what were they to do now? Linghan looked into the distance and called out loudly, "We can negotiate. But if you make another move against me, I will immediately run, and I guarantee you will never find me again." "Insolence! How dare you speak to our mistress in this way?" The warriors of Sea race all yelled in indignation. In their hearts, Hellion Zun Shui was an existence on par with a divine deity, and they could not allow the slightest bit of blasphemy against her. A mere human actually dared to negotiate with their mistress? He had to be delusional. Yet a voice was heard from within the carriage as she said, "Then, let us negotiate." Obviously, Hellion Zun Shui at the very least admitted Linghan was very capable at fleeing after he had managed to successfully escape from her once. Otherwise, she would have simply apprehended him for interrogation rather than give him a chance for a negotiation. Chapter 535, Leading into a Trap. Chapter 535, Leading into a Trap. Linghan smiled faintly. He knew that she would definitely be willing to negotiate. "I have a few questions to ask your highness," he called out loudly. "Oh, then you should first answer one question of mine, otherwise, there would be no further need for discussion." Hellion Zun Shui said calmly, "Is that vial in your possession?" "Indeed." Linghan made no denial, and said, "That's right. It is indeed in my possession." For a while, no further sound was heard from within the carriage. Mayhap Hellion Zun Shui was too excited by the news, and was currently getting her emotions back under control. After a while, her voice was heard again. "All right, what do you want to know? How did your highness come to know about the matter of this vial?" Linghan asked. "There are some things which are not appropriate for too many people to know. Let us switch to a different location for further discussion," Hellion Zun Shui said. Linghan nodded, and said, "All right, follow me but not too close. Otherwise, if I get a scare, who knows, I may never appear again." Hellion Zun Shui gave a cold humph, obviously very displeased. Linghan walked ahead, whilst the Sea race followed behind. The direction that Linghan took was naturally where the mine was located. If Hellion Zun Shui really made a move against him, then he'd lead them to the shaft and kill them with a trap. On the landmass, the members of the Sea race were not very fast. Thankfully, though, the mine was not very far from the imperial city. As a result, in less than half an hour, they arrived at their destination. "Stop!" Hellion Zun Shui halted the advance of the carriage from afar and called out, "Human, is this place that ancient mine?" She had not been deceived. Linghan stopped, then turned around and said, "That's right." A figure walked out of the carriage. However, her whole body was wrapped in multiple streaks of divine purple light, so there was no way to clearly see her appearance. One could not even see clearly if the figure was tall or short, man or woman. It was only faintly visible that the figure wore some kind of jade-green clothing and had extremely long hair. "You all wait here," she commanded. "Yes, Your Highness." Everyone else strictly obeyed her order. Hellion Zun Shui walked towards Linghan. She had enough assurance that as long as she was near enough to him, she could take Linghan down directly, and not give him any single bit of chance to escape via teleportation. "That's close enough," Linghan said, smiling. Actually, with his divine sense, he could allow her to walk a bit closer, but there was no need to let her know his limits and trump cards. Hellion Zun Shui could not help but sigh internally. If she attacked from this distance, she only had a 30% chance. Your Highness, you may speak now, Linghan said. Hellion Zun Shui gave a soft humph. A mere flower blossom tear cultivator actually dared to behave as if he was on equal terms with her, which was something that made her feel very displeased. But for the sake of that vial, she suppressed her anger and said, in truth, I was the one who deliberately leaked the information to Xian Kongyun. Ling Han was flabbergasted. Xian Kongyun was only a chess piece. Killing another with a cursed tool would leave no traces behind. No matter how bizarre the death had been, it would still be identified as natural death because there was absolutely no need for the killer to personally make a move, so how could it be possible that the game would be given away? But if one used a cursed tool, there was one clear fact. Either that the victim was too powerful, and the user had no way of fighting him face to face, or it was possible that the victim's status was too unique, and the user could not make a move right out in the open on him. Which category did Hellion Zun Shui belong to? Thus, when Xian Kongyun died so inconceivably, you immediately guessed that he must have been killed by the cursed tool, and so charged over here with your people, Linghan deduced. That's right. If too much time had passed, you would have naturally fled, so how would I be able to find you again? Hellion Zun Shui said. Linghan was curious and asked, you are, at minimum, a high-level heaven tier cultivator. You seek the cursed tool. Could it be that you want to kill a shattering void tier cultivator? If this really could curse a shattering void tier cultivator to death, then what level would this jade vial be? A god tool? That is not something that you need to concern yourself with. Hellion Zun Shui humphed, and said, this kind of treasure is not something that you can possess. Hand it over to me, and firstly, your safety will be guaranteed, and secondly, I can compensate you with a spirit tool. Oh, what kind of spirit tool? Is it as valuable as this one? Linghan drew out the demon birth sword. Very obviously, Hellion Zun Shui's figure stiffened slightly. She had definitely seen through the level of the demon birth sword. That was a level 10 spirit tool. What could she produce that would move Linghan? She had really underestimated this human. His wealth was really a bit shocking. She paused, then said, I am determined to get that vial, so I advise you to hand it over. If not, then even if you flee to the ends of the world, I will still find you. Linghan smiled, then asked, really? Are you sure that wherever I go, you will follow? Hellion Zun Shui humphed coldly, and was just about to begin boasting. But then, something dawned on her as she looked ahead and said, so this is what you're relying on? To escape into the old mine? Naive, she said coldly. Now that the cursed tool has been withdrawn, the cursed chi in this place would begin to drop, and who am I? A member of the royal clan of the Northern Sea. My natal horoscope was decided by the gods, so how could I possibly be wounded by the cursed chi here? She was really quite at sunder. Unfortunately, she had no idea what kind of changes had taken place here. Cursed chi was really nothing in comparison. Linghan laughed loudly, and said, then, come chase after me. Who knows, if you manage to catch up to me, maybe I'll let you have it. He broke out into a run and fled into the old mine. Hellion Zun Shui did not know what he meant, but after a moment of thought, she was sure that it was not very possible that it was a compliment. Immediately, she gave a cold humph, and followed him in. Linghan moved recklessly, and attacked madly. He wanted to draw out the 12 ancient corpses beneath the ground here. The lake of blood would do too. Of course, the silver spider was the ideal target. In short, whatever could suppress Hellion Zun Shui would do. And after this one battle, would any more sea race dare to come here? So you choose to do things the hard way. Hellion Zun Shui humphed coldly. With a palm strike, her origin power transformed into a beautiful, gigantic hand that pressed down towards Linghan. The might of the palm strike had yet to hit him, but the terrifying pressure behind this blow had already caused cracks to appear all over Linghan's body, and blood poured crazily from his wounds. One had to know that he had body of iron sheet. The toughness of his body was comparable to precious metal of the same level as he, but the mere pressure was enough to shatter his skin. If he really suffered a strike, what chance did he have at surviving it? What a damn powerful woman! Ling Han exclaimed in surprise, and tossed out both arms. He threw out the 2 divine corpses. He did not plan to take them back. It should not be a bad option to bury these 2 divine corpses in here. There had to be a very powerful background behind the 12 ancient corpses, and they were definitely not inferior to these 2 divine corpses in his possession. Yi! Hellion Zun Shui halted. She arrived in front of the 2 divine corpses, and an expression of surprise appeared on her face that was not visible to anyone else. This is a divine corpse, she mumbled softly, and her expression of disbelief became even more pronounced. Ling Han actually had 2 divine corpses in his possession. This human was indeed very strange. However, the divinity of these 2 divine corpses had already been expended completely. Moreover, this was the mortal plane, and it had its own rules. A god-level elite cultivator was not that much stronger than a shattering void tier 1, and he wanted to use these 2 divine corpses to scare her into stopping? How naive. With a casual wave of her hand, she separated the 2 divine corpses. Since the essence of their divinity had been exhausted, they had lost whatever value they had. She couldn't be bothered to deal with them in that case. There is no way you can escape, Hellion Zun Shui declared icily. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Who said I wanted to escape?" He had arrived at the site where the cursed tool had been placed. With a single punch, a terrifying amount of origin power added with his own body's physical strength created a very scary amount of destructive power. Peng! A pillar of blood soared upwards. Chapter 536, Unable to withstand a single blow. Chapter 536, Unable to withstand a single blow. Hong, the pillar of blood soared skywards, and a terrible scene appeared. Multiple stars actually fell as if it was the end of the world. Ling Han did not hesitate in the slightest and entered into the Black Tower at his first chance to dodge this calamity. The stench of blood permeated and blocked the divine sense from extending outside the body, and affected visibility as well. As a result, Hellion Zun Shui actually did not discover that Ling Han had disappeared at first, and still remained in the mine as she wanted to find Ling Han, subdue him and snatch away the vial of curses. But it was only a mere instant. The ocean of blood soared skywards, its terrible might on full display. Hellion Zun Shui's expression changed drastically. With her cultivation level, she was naturally able to clearly detect how terrifying this bloody water was. She hurriedly shot upwards. She was sure that Ling Han had long since teleported out. Otherwise, how could it be possible that a mere flower blossom tier cultivator like him be able to withstand such terrifying might and power? It was too late. A blood-colored tsunami wave quickly formed. This time, the 12 undecayed corpses did not appear. However, the gigantic silver spider appeared, and a sacred, terrifying aura emanated from its mountain-sized body. It was really too powerful. Before, Ling Han merely took one look at it, and it almost caused his soul to fly away and scatter and his physical body to burst even though he possessed a sliver of divine sense of the heaven tier, and furthermore, had already formed the body of iron sheet. The toughness of his physical body was on par with precious metal of the same level. Ling Han was already so, what more when it was another? The army of sea race in the distance released terrible cries as their bodies exploded one after another. The giant silver spider's gaze swept over Hellion Zun Shui, and this time, it did not simply shift its gaze like it was staring at a bug, but showed a hint of anger in its expression. A huge leg rose and pierced through the air towards Hellion Zun Shui. Even though Ling Han was hiding in the Black Tower, his expression changed drastically upon seeing this blow. It was too powerful, so powerful that it could even shoot down the stars in the skies. Hellion Zun Shui was completely unable to dodge. With a PU, her slender body was already pierced through. The spider's leg pierced through her body, and there were lingering traces of blood remaining on the spear-like silver limb. Pu, Hellion Zun Shui threw up blood, but an immeasurable divine light flickered around her body which, too, was sacred and elegant, and filled with an ancient air. The giant silver spider actually revealed a very human expression. It abruptly withdrew its limb, its size shrinking swiftly, then transformed into a silver light that shot into the waves. Furthermore, the waters, too, began to swiftly subside, and very quickly, it had completely disappeared into the mine, as if the previous phenomenon had never happened. Except the army of the sea race had been turned into minced meat lying outside the mine, while Hellion Zun Shui had had her body pierced through. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, thinking that this place was really the perfect location to trap someone. Even a high-level Heaven Tier cultivator had practically been killed in an instant, and this had also allowed him to see the gap between the Heaven Tier and the shattering Void Tier. Unable to withstand even a single strike, the higher one's level in martial arts, the larger the power gap would be between different cultivation levels. Even someone as powerful as Hellion Zun Shui was unable to fight back at all in the face of that giant silver spider. He flew towards Hellion Zun Shui, yet saw that the divine light that had surrounded this woman before had already disappeared and revealed her true face. She really was a beauty, with a fine nose and cherry lips. She had long, shapely eyebrows and skin as fair and smooth as jade. However, her eyes were tightly closed. Otherwise, they would have definitely added some further radiance to the level of her beauty. And on her left shoulder, there was a bloody hole. At this moment, blood was currently gushing out. It was obviously where the silver spider had pierced her through. Ling Han was astonished. Hellion Zun Shui was actually not dead. Though none of her vital spots had been hit, with the power of the giant silver spider, if one was pierced through, the attack would explode inside one's body, and the destructive power of such a blow would be enough to destroy everything. From the look of things, the giant silver spider had obviously been merciful. Ling Han's gaze swept over her, and instantly, his killing intent rose. This woman was too dangerous. Moreover, she wanted the vial of curses in his possession, and would obviously not give up until she had gotten hold of it. He definitely could not leave this future trouble alive. Ling Han drew out the demon birth sword. Having compassion for the fairer sex depended on the situation. To be soft-hearted to one's enemy would be equivalent to be irresponsible for oneself, one's family, and friends. He did not hesitate and struck out with a slash. Wang. A halo of light emanated from Hellion Zun Shui's body and transformed into a protective layer which blocked the attack of the demon birth sword. Fuck. Ling Han sensed it slightly, and discovered that this halo of light originated from the necklace worn around Hellion Zun Shui's neck. To be more accurate, it should have come from the pendant hung on the necklace. Previously, when the giant silver spider released a severe blow, this pendant shone too, and made the giant silver spider be merciful and not erase Hellion Zun Shui. Now, it had managed to block Ling Han's fatal attack. From the look of things, this was an automatic defensive spirit tool. However, the giant silver spider was too powerful, so powerful that the spirit tool did not even have the time to activate. And in comparison, Ling Han was much too weak, which was why this spirit tool could so easily block his attack. Annoying. Ling Han bared his teeth. At first, he had thought that he would be entirely worthy of being recognized as the strongest person in the North region. Who would have foreseen that he would be even more helpless than he was in the desolate North? At least there, everyone would have to respectfully address him as Grandmaster Ling, but what about now? Did the identity of a Heaven-tier alchemist have any effect or influence on Hellion Zun Shui or the giant silver spider? He was dissatisfied, and threw out a few more strikes. He even made use of sword chi, but the defensive ability of that halo of light was really too strong. No matter what he did, it was absolutely useless. Ling Han did everything he could think of, but it was still useless. He had even wanted to draw her into the Black Tower. In that way, whether he killed her would no longer matter, as it would be enough to suppress this princess of the sea race for the rest of her life. However, that immeasurable divine light similarly stopped Ling Han's divine sense from wrapping around her. In short, even though Hellion Zun Shui appeared to be in a coma at this moment, it was as if she had become a porcupine, which he couldn't even touch. He did not make any further move, and that pendant no longer shone. Hellion Zun Shui's bright as moonlight, beautiful face and long, slender body was revealed. Ling Han swept one look over her, and mumbled with much malice, "Flat chess." Actually, it was not really that flat, but in comparison with Liu Yutong, Li Sai-chan, and Zhu Xian-er, who were well developed to a shocking level, she was naturally on a much more inferior level. The shocking thing was that the wound on her left shoulder healed very quickly, and the blood had already stopped seeping out. The wound slowly began to scab over. One had to know that this wound was created by a supreme creature, and the martial intent of the giant silver spider had been left behind in this wound. As long as this martial intent was still present, it would have been impossible for the wound to heal. And how long could the martial intent of a shattering void tear cultivator last? Millennia. Hellion Zun Shui should not have the ability to disperse the martial intent of the shattering void tear. It should have been the giant silver spider. In the instant it withdrew its limb, it withdrew its martial intent as well. As a result, though Hellion Zun Shui appeared to be wounded very severely, only a hole had been pierced through in her shoulder. The reason she fell unconscious was because she, too, had suffered the barrage of the martial intent of a shattering void tear cultivator. With her divine sense, she was definitely not able to withstand it. This also meant that she could possibly awaken at any moment. Fuck, and he actually came so close to her. Ling Han's heart shivered. Since he was not able to kill this princess of the sea race, then his only option would be to flee, and let her just come to hunt him down in the middle state. But it was too late. Hellion Zun Shui's eyelids trembled lightly, and she opened her eyes. What a beautiful woman! She actually possessed a pair of sea blue eyes, and matched with her jade-like fair skin, fine, straight nose, and clear-cut features, she had the charm that belonged to one from a foreign land. Who are you? She looked at Ling Han in confusion, then looked down at herself. And who am I? She had lost her memory. Chapter 537, Amnesia. Chapter 537, Amnesia. After sustaining a single strike from the giant silver spider, Hellion Zun Shui actually lost her memory. That was a very likely possibility. Because her divine sense had suffered an attack on the level of the shattering void tear, amnesia was a very ordinary consequence. But the question was this amnesia a short-term loss of memory, or a permanent loss? If it was only a temporary one, then how long would it last for? A few days, a few months, or a few years? Ling Han was astonished. He realized that he could not sense any movement of origin power from her body at all. Could it be that after she had lost her memory, she did not even know how to circulate her origin power anymore? Was that even possible? Ling Han could not confirm it, but since this princess of the sea race could no longer circulate origin power, then what threat could she be to him? One had to know that the reason that cultivators could overturn mountains and empty oceans was because they had cultivated origin power. Without origin power, the pure strength of cultivators would not be that much stronger than any ordinary person, and their defense would not be much stronger, either. Just make a flower blossom tear cultivator unable to circulate his origin power defensively, and then have ordinary soldiers try and attack him with a multitude of arrows. She was guaranteed to look like a beehive just from the number of holes he would have. However, Hellion Zun Shui still had a spirit tool on her that could activate on its own, so if anyone wanted to kill her, it was practically an impossible feat. Ling Han gave a sigh. He actually couldn't do anything to a woman that couldn't even fight back. Now, he could only hope that this princess of the sea race would have amnesia for a long enough period of time, long enough to allow him to develop to an extent that he no longer had to fear her. Hellion Zun Shui stared at Ling Han blankly, yet with clear hope in her gaze, as if hoping that Ling Han could tell her who she was. There was a touching glint of emotion brimming in her large sea blue eyes. Ling Han felt that this woman was a little cute at this moment. Previously, she had been so insufferably arrogant, and now she actually seemed like a pitiful little puppy. He could not help but smile, and said, "My name is Ling Han. Your name is Hellion Zun Zuido. You have any recollection of this name?" Hellion Zun Shui? Hellion Zun Shui? The princess of the sea race shook her head endlessly, and the only missing gesture was biting on one of her fingers. After a long time, an expression of pleased surprise appeared on her face. "My name is Hellion Zun Shui." Ling Han was defeated. Did this woman have an attribute of being stupidly adorable? Where are we now? Why are we here? What is the relation between the two of us? Hellion Zun Shui asked in a single breath like a curious kid. Ling Han pondered for a moment, then answered, "This is Fire Country. As for you, I was the one who picked you up." I also do not know who you actually are. As for this place, we came here to walk around. All right, now that our walk is over, let us both go back to our respective mothers. Goodbye. He turned around and prepared to leave. He really did not want to stay by the side of a high-level heaven-tier cultivator. Who knew when this woman would regain her memories? If she suddenly made a move on him at that time, he'd be done for. He could not be soft-hearted in this situation. Pa! He had only took a single step when he felt a tightening brace around his legs. Hellion Zun Shuer had actually clamped her arms around his legs. This woman was behaving like a shrew without any care for her image. She sat on the ground as her arms wrapped around one of his legs. More importantly, this woman was terrifyingly strong, and Ling Han was actually unable to struggle out of her vice-like grip. How could this be possible? Wasn't she no longer able to circulate origin power? How could she still possess such tremendous strength? Could it be? Ling Han immediately came to a realization. This woman was in the same situation as he. She, too, had cultivated a physical technique. At this moment, she was using purely her physical strength, and he guessed that it had to be on the level of the spiritual infant tier at least. This was what made Ling Han feel as if he had been locked in chains forged from divine metal, unable to move a single muscle. Let go, he said. No. Hellion Zun Shuer said with a great amount of determination. She indeed did not release him. On the other hand, her grip became even tighter than before. Damn. Instantly, cracks could be heard from the bones in Ling Han's leg. He had formed body of iron sheet and his physical body was as tough as precious metals on the same level as he, but the problem here was, how could level 6 metal be able to withstand the brute force which was, at the very least, on level 7? If this went on, the bones in his leg could really be broken into pieces just from this. Ling Han hurriedly surrendered as he said, all right, all right, all right. I'll let you continue to follow me, okay? Hellion Zun Shuer had lost her memory, but her intelligence did not seem to have been lowered from that. She raised her head to look at Ling Han doubtfully and asked, really? You're not lying to me. If I lie to you, then I'm a sea demon. Ling Han blurted out carelessly. Hellion Zun Shuer was a member of the sea race in the first place, so did not have any prejudice against sea demons. She released her grip and got to her feet, but then she immediately took hold of one of Ling Han's hands, as if still fearing that he would escape. Ling Han gritted his teeth. When this princess of the sea race recovered her memory and found out that she had actually held hands with him, who knew if she would dissolve into humiliated fury and tear him into a few hundred or a few thousand pieces. Sea girl, remember, you were the one who took the initiative to hold my hand. Don't you act dumb about it in future, he said seriously. Oh. Hellion Zun Shuer had lost her memory, so she naturally couldn't care less. No, you have to swear. Ling Han wanted to use something to control her as much as possible. That way, if she actually managed to recover her memory in future, he could still babble some nonsense to deliberately anger her, which would allow him some time to escape alive. What kind of swear? Hellion Zun Shuer asked a little dumbly. Just say that you are the one who took the initiative to take my hand. If you wrongly accuse me of it in future, the Sea Emperor is a great big idiot, Ling Han said. Hellion Zun Shuer naturally, without a doubt, held up her fair, slender right hand and swore. A thought flashed through Ling Han's head. Could he make use of the vial of curses? Though she looked a little dumb and cute at the moment, he only had to recall how she had been like before to know that this woman was definitely a firm, ruthless woman. The moment she regained her memory, it would be Ling Han who would be rendered absolutely helpless. He made a move to pluck a hair from her head, but that pendant immediately shone and blocked his hand from moving any further. Ling Han, with no other choice, could only say, pluck out one of your hairs and give to me. Hellion Zun Shuer bit on one of her fingers, and after a moment, she shook her head and said, I can't. Why not? Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that she had already begun to regain her memory? I seem to remember Mother saying before that I can't recklessly give a man something from my body, Hellion Zun Shuer said with absolute seriousness. This. Ling Han thought for a moment, then asked, so if it was a woman, it would be fine? He could let Hu know out if that was the case. No. Hellion Zun Shuer shook her head stubbornly. Ling Han was speechless. Why? Why couldn't he even manage to deceive a stupidly cute woman who had lost her memory? This was too much of a failure. Ari. He gave a sigh, and took a step to leave. Hellion Zun Shui hurriedly followed behind him, one hand still firmly gripping onto the corner of Ling Han's shirt as if she was a little wife who had been wronged. Ling Han walked to where the army of Sea Race had once been. The only thing visible now was a scene of slaughter and carnage. Every single one of them had died from their bodies bursting. There was not a single complete corpse visible here anymore, as all of them had been turned into ripped pieces of bone and flesh, blood soaking all over the ground. Ah! A scared expression appeared on Hellion Zun Shui's face, and she could not help but throw herself into Ling Han's arms, hugging him tightly to herself. Ka, Ka, Ka. Immediately, loud noises could be heard from Ling Han's ribs. Fuck, be a bit gentler. With you strangling me in such a way, I am just about to join those people on the ground, crushed by your embrace. Moreover, your small breasts really have no gradation or texture, and I don't have the slightest feeling that there are two lumps of flesh pressing down on my chest. If you keep holding on, I am going to die, Ling Han gasped out. Chapter 538, Kidnap. Chapter 538, Kidnap. Hellion Zun Shui finally released him, but hid herself behind Ling Han, tightly gripping onto the corner of his shirt. Ling Han could distinctly feel her trembling. Such an overbearing, domineering woman actually had such a delicate side to her. Could amnesia cause someone's character to experience a tremendous change? Or would it cause someone to show a side that they usually kept hidden deep within? Ling Han did not know, nor did he care. The biggest problem for him now was, how was he supposed to throw this huge burden away? This was practically a time bomb. When she actually managed to regain her memories, this time bomb would explode. Just the mere thought of it would give him insomnia. Hai Nyo-wan, let's see how fast you can run, Ling Han said. He had already led Hellion Zun Shui far away from the mine to avoid her going into another emotional turbulence and strangling him into a corpse. Oh. Hellion Zun Shui nodded, then asked curiously, why do you call me Hai Nyo? Because I want to. Ling Han glared at her. Instantly, Hellion Zun Shui's eyes brimmed with tears. Then, she said with an aggrieved pout, why are you being so harsh toward me? Immediately, Ling Han bared his teeth. If you want to cry, just go ahead, but why do you have to grip a hand around his neck? Did she not know that this move could cause a fatality? However, he did not dare to carelessly toss away such a time bomb, either. Otherwise, if she really did explode, even if she only possessed the physical strength of the spiritual infant tier, it was still a very terrifying thing. Furthermore, this was only his estimate. What if her physical technique had reached the level of the heaven tier? I won't be harsh toward you anymore, all right? Ling Han sighed. Against a Hellion Zun Shui at her prime, he would not admit defeat in the slightest, and even tricked her successfully. If it was not for the fact that she had a very powerful spirit tool in her possession, she would have been killed by his trap already. But the current her was unable to circulate origin power, and her intelligence had also become adorably low. But now, on the contrary, she actually managed to suppress Ling Han. This fact was something that Ling Han found inconceivable no matter how much he pondered on the matter. Why had things become this way? Hellion Zun Shui let go, her expression clearly saying, if you dare to be harsh toward me, I'll continue to strangle you, acting perfectly like a little wife. Ling Han broke out in a cold sweat. He had already had quite a few times of physical contact with her. After this woman regained her memory, she would definitely fly into a humiliated rage. Moreover, he had even just about estimated the measurements of her flat chest, which was really inadequate. Then, let's go. His legs exerted force, and Xiao, his entire person immediately shot up into the skies. Hellion Zun Shui quickly took a leap just like Ling Han. However, she was faster, and also managed to reach a greater height. Immediately, she had surpassed Ling Han. At first, she was greatly astonished that she could actually manage to jump so high, but then, she instantly became excited, releasing a bout of clear, tinkling laughter. Ling Han sighed. It would be nice if she could stay the way she was now forever and leave all the fighting and killing for men to do. A thought flashed through his head. Could he use this period of time to instill some concepts of peace and beauty into Hellion Zunxue? Though she had lost her memory, her current experiences would become part of her memories in future as well, and would definitely have some influence on her. To personally train her? It's a very dastardly plan, but I like it. Though neither of them used any kind of technique, the pure force of their physical bodies was already terrifying enough. Moreover, the advantage of brute force was that it could last a long time, just like the brute force of demonic beasts and unlike that of cultivators, who were limited by the size of the spiritual oceans in their dantian. The moment their origin power was completely expended, they would become absolutely useless. As a result, the two of them raced for over an hour in a single breath, and soon arrived at the small town Linghan was staying in. However, neither of them was short of breath. Linghan was actually a little worried. There was a risk to bringing this girl home. Hopefully, it wouldn't lead to a scene of slaughter and bloodshed. But for the sake of instilling some concepts of peace, happiness, and the like, he had to let this girl experience what it felt like to be cared for and loved. They entered into the Ling residence. When the servants saw Ling Han, they all bowed and paid their respects, but unlike the restrained manner of other servants, they had a friendly and cordial air. Soon after, Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang ran out as well. Their son had been gone for a few days, but to them, it was as if several years had passed since they last saw him. Yu Hongchang was surprised. Her son was really amazing, just a few days, and he had kidnapped yet another beautiful daughter-in-law. What else could she be? The girl looked very bashful, and kept holding onto the corner of her son's shirt, showing just how much she stuck close to him. TSK, she was really beautiful. Furthermore, she had a pair of unusual blue eyes and a good figure as well, especially her legs. They were slender and long, and her backside was highly raised, displaying an amazing flexibility. Though, her breasts were a little small. That's all right. Even if she gave birth, it was not a must that the baby had to feed from her. Yu Hongchang had already visualized what would happen many, many years in the future, and a bright smile immediately appeared on her face. She walked over and asked, "Miss, what is your name?" She did not pay any attention to her son at all. "I am Hellion Zunxue," the princess of the sea race answered. "Miss, come with me." Yu Hongchang held Hellion Zunxue's hand and left naturally to teach her some secret techniques as her mother-in-law, such as how to handle her son. Ling Dongxing patted Ling Han's shoulder in quiet sympathy, and both father and son were simultaneously rendered speechless. Ling Han let Hunyou out. When the little girl saw Hellion Zunxue, her ferocious nature was on full display. This woman gave her a very strong oppressive feeling, making her have the urge to rip open the former's neck. "Come, let's eat," Ling Han said, smiling. Hunyou's expression instantly switched to a smile, and she happily followed him in. It was not possible that the matter of the sea race would simply end like this. After all, a princess had died, so it would definitely give rise to a great commotion. However, even those far off in the imperial city could feel the activity at the Battle of the Mine, so if the sea race really headed there to investigate the place, they would definitely not come out of it easily. With that giant silver spider in place, he believed that there was no need to worry about the desolate north. What worried Ling Han, on the other hand, was that old mine. What exactly was buried underneath it? Just 12 ancient corpses and a mountain-sized spider. He did not believe that was all. But with the giant silver spider there, could he go to the deeper levels to find out? If he wanted to know what exactly was buried underneath the old mine, he needed greater power. At the very least, he had to regain his cultivation level at the heaven tier. Backed by the Black Tower, he should be able to explore further. The safest way was naturally for him to break through to the shattering void tier. That way, he'd be able to barge in directly. He planned to stay at home for a dozen over days before heading towards the middle state. Both Liu Yutong and Li Sai-chan decided to stay back in the Ling residence and wait for Ling Han to return. Firstly, they already had sufficient resources for cultivation, and secondly, they were there to protect the Ling clan. Li Sai-chan still had to help concoct alchemical pills for Ling Dongxing and his wife. With Ling Han's training, Li Sai-chan had improved extremely fast in alchemy. By now, she was only restricted by her own cultivation level. Otherwise, she would have already made the leap to become a black-grade high-level alchemist. The strategy they were using was to obtain victory in a roundabout way. As long as they had convinced their parents-in-law, did they still have to worry that Ling Han was unwilling to recognize them as his wives? Ling Han also left Guang Yuan and Zhu Wuju behind to guard the Ling clan. Their talent was limited, and if they wanted to break through to the flower blossom tier, they still needed to accumulate enough power for at least a dozen over years. They wouldn't be able to help much even if they followed Ling Han, so it would be better for them to stay behind and work hard on their cultivation. Thus, after a dozen over days, Ling Han, Hu Niu, as well as Helian Zun Shui set out, heading towards Extreme Yang City. There was no way he could manage to shove off this sea girl. Even if Yu Hongchang had successfully duped her into calling Yu Hongchang mother, it was as if she was a newly born chick. Since the first person she had set eyes on was Ling Han, she was determined to follow him. Chapter 539, Returning to Extreme Yang City. Chapter 539, Returning to Extreme Yang City. Bringing two girls, one big and one small, Ling Han set out towards Extreme Yang City. Hu Niu and Helian Zun Shui were born rivals. They would fight over food and fight over who got to stick to Ling Han. Furthermore, Hu Niu finally met a worthy competitor because Helian Zun Shui's appetite actually did not lose to hers. In addition, she was naturally very strong, and so usually managed to get into an advantageous position. Ling Han summoned Nag Yang out for interrogation again, and found out that the royal clan of Helian actually had the bloodline of true dragons. The imperial clan of the Central Sea possessed the purest bloodline of true dragons. The Sea Emperor of every generation was the ruler over all four seas, one who deserved the title of emperor. In addition, all the royal clans of the four seas were no minor characters, either. They, too, had the bloodline of true dragons, but theirs was slightly inferior in purity. No wonder. Ling Han nodded. He had cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant body art, and once he reached the level of accomplished, he would possess the power of 9 true dragons. Why did he use true dragons to make a comparison? That was because true dragons were the divine beasts with the most powerful physical bodies. Since Helian Zun Shui possessed the bloodline of true dragons, even if it wasn't very pure, her physical strength was definitely something to be feared. Hu Niu was a freak, but there was too big of a gap between their cultivation levels, so it was natural that she could not compare with her. Just look at how Ling Han, who had cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant body art, still could do nothing to Helian Zun Shui. Helian Zun Shui was like a blank sheet of paper at the moment. One could freely write as one wished on it. Ling Han tried as much as possible to let her accept happy experiences. Even if she bickered with Hu Niu, that was only something playful, and not the kind of death battle that would take place between mortal enemies. In comparison, Hu Niu seemed more like an adult as she never cried nor threw tantrums. Helian Zun Shui, on the other hand, would cry and throw tantrums. She obviously possessed a terrifying amount of bare strength, yet upon the slightest issue, she would widen her eyes in sorrow, looking like she would weep at any moment. She had gotten addicted to acting adorable. They passed through the fallen moon gorge on their way into the north region. With their speed, they naturally did not need to spend a few months before finally making it into Extreme Yang City. In a mere 10 days, they had once again returned to this ancient city. Previously, they had been traveling at full speed, and though they had seen many cities on their journey, they merely passed by without entering. Thus, now that they had entered into the city, Helian Zun Shui immediately became excited and would look here and there at the surrounding sights. Cotton candy. She took it. Sugar figurines. She took it. Bamboo toy horse. She took it. Ling Han could only keep following behind her and pay for her. This sea girl had gone a little mad in her playing. As she ate, she would joyously laugh. Childish. Hu Niu declared in disdain, yet had forgotten that she, too, was holding onto a sugar figurine which she was currently licking happily. Yi, where did this little girl come from? She looks so pretty. Helian Zun Shui was like a sprite, beautiful and filled with a foreign charm, and was naturally eye-catching. Soon enough, She caught the eye of some people. That one was a spoiled young master, who was currently staring lewdly at Helion Zun Shue's pretty face. His saliva was practically about to drip out of his mouth. However, just when his gaze moved downwards, wanting to asterisk at Helion Zun Shue's entrancing mountains, he was stunned, and quickly shifted his eyes back upwards. Too bad, she was flat-chested. Helion Zun Shue tilted her head and looked at him, and asked in slight confusion, "Why are you blocking my path?" The spoiled young master snickered, and said, "Little girl, follow me back, let us have some fun." He was obviously used to having his way. Waving his hand, he commanded, "Take her back." "Yes, young master." Immediately from behind him, 4 sturdy servants stepped out, all of them looking as fierce as wolves and tigers. Helion Zun Shue was so scared that she screamed in panic, and hurriedly ducked back behind Ling Han. With her speed, there were really not that many people who could catch up to her. Furthermore, so what if they actually caught up to her? With a shove backed by her titanic strength, probably even Ling Han would have his bones broken. She obviously had terrifying power yet deliberately pretended to be weak. Did she not fear that she would be struck by lightning? Ling Han mocked her behavior internally, then turned and said to Helion Zun Shue, "Look what this trash is doing. This is called taking advantage of one's position to bully others. See girl, don't you think that this kind of person is really detestable?" Helion Zun Shue nodded her head quickly and patted her chest. With lingering fear, she said, "Detestable, almost scared me to death. So, we cannot act like this kind of person, right?" Ling Han continued to guide her with enticing words. "Right, we can't act like this kind of person." Helion Zun Shue nodded. "However, we also cannot allow such trash to bully us. Remember, we do not take the initiative to trifle with others, as that is not a right thing to do. But if others trifle with us, we cannot hold our punches, either. When we should fight back, we should still fight back. We are not punching bags, right?" Ling Han continued. These words were a little long, and Helion Zun Shue was a little dazed. However, out of habit, she still nodded and said, "Right. Who do you think you damn are to actually dare to interfere in my matters?" The spoiled young master was displeased now. Did these 2 people treat him as empty air? They actually began to chat idly as if there was no one else around them. With a wave of his hand, he commanded, "Beat up this man until he's disabled, then bring the girl back to the residence." "Yes, young master." The 4 servants once again set forth. With a flick of Ling Han's finger, a flash of energy transformed into 4 streaks which respectively hit the foreheads of the 4 servants. Suddenly, pu, 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 a bloody hole appeared on the foreheads of the 4 servants, and they dropped onto the ground abruptly. "You, how dare you, you actually dare to touch even members of my Zhong clan," the spoiled young master shouted in anger, both shocked and afraid. "Who knows who you are?" With another flick of Ling Han's finger, "Pa," the spoiled young master followed in the footsteps of the 4 servants. A bloody hole appeared on his forehead, and he flopped onto the ground. All around them, the passers-by all stepped back. Matters had become serious. That was the young master of the Zhong clan, yet he had actually died here. The Zhong clan would definitely fly into a thunderous rage, and by then, whoever was actually present at the scene would be in for a bout of extremely bad luck. They had better run quickly. Yet Ling Han was absolutely uncaring. In the north region, there were pitifully few people that could fill him with wariness. Furthermore, didn't he still have a tremendously strong princess of the sea race beside him? If needed, he could let her have the opportunity to train for a bit. "Let's go." He continued to head towards the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Meanwhile, Helion Zun Shue and Hu Niu, one on either side, held onto one of his hands. Before entering into Extreme Yang City, Ling Han had disguised his appearance and made it so he looked like a young man in his mid-20s. This shocked Helion Zun Shue a bit, but she still managed to see through his disguise with a single look. Obviously, even if she had temporarily forgotten how to circulate her origin power, there was no decline to her perception, which was shockingly high. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion was located in the center of Extreme Yang City, and even if they walked around and played around on their way here, They had still arrived in front of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion about an hour later. Hold it right there. A group of people raced over. They should be the people of the Zhong clan. When they found out one of their clansmen had actually been killed in broad daylight right out in the open, they naturally raced over to seek vengeance. How could it be possible that Ling Han would pay them any heed? He simply stepped directly into the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Hu Niu, though, turned back and made a face at those people. Damn it, the members of the Zhong clan all roared in rage. The two most powerful parties in Extreme Yang City was the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and the Alchemist Society. Who would dare make trouble in these two locations? They could only choose to wait outside. Ling Han couldn't possibly hide inside for the rest of his life, right? Ling Han and the girls entered into the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, and immediately, a beautiful female attendant approached and asked in a crisp voice, "Two honored customers, do you want to buy something?" Hu Niu was extremely displeased, and, her hands on her hips, piped up, "Niu is here too." Ling Han laughed, and said, "Pass along a message to Ying Hong. Just say that someone is here to fulfill an agreement. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,